Right. We are live. We are here with Mr. E.
Yeah.
Okay. That's where we'll go. Mr. E from Cryptids of the Corn. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Hey guys, I am the great and powerful Mr. E, aka Justin. I am one half, one third Cryptids of the Corn podcast. I have a co-host, and my wife helps behind the scenes a lot of the time. So we are we're a cryptid, conspiracy paranormal podcast. We like to say we're scientific and magical thing combined. Uh, oh gosh, we have like 300 or 400 public episodes now, and I probably 200 Patreon episodes. Uh, we're nuts. We've been speakers all around the U.S. We've been very blessed with that side of life. We've actually been feather I always put in my hat is we were speakers at the biggest Bigfoot festival in the world, which is nuts.
That is nuts, right?
It's 65,000 people.
Wow.
It didn't even look real. Like it. I mean, I've seen like pictures. Like we've been to some big like outdoor music conferences and stuff like that, but everybody's out there for Bigfoot. It's crazy. But yeah, you can find our podcast on pretty much every podcast catcher. If you listen to podcasts or music, even anywhere, you probably find our podcast. The website is cryptidsofthecorn.com. Real simple, just the name of the podcast, cryptidsofthecorn.com. And if you want to email us, it's cryptidsofthecornpodcast@gmail.com. Jay, my co-host, is normally the promotion guy. I'm super bad with self-promotion. That's where you can find all of our t-shirts. You can find links to we do other podcasts, and we produce a couple shows for other people. So all the links are on the website. It's kind of like an umbrella thing. I just came out with a book, and you can get it from there too. Living UFOs, The Ocean Above Our Head. I got, they're okay. I'm like, I know I got a copy sitting near me. There better be. That's pretty much us. I was, like we were talking off air a minute ago, I was what's called a fisheries field crew leader and a fisheries field technician, aka a field biologist. That's just the easiest way to explain it to people, because when you get into biology, there's about 5,000 terms for about everything for every job position. For non-biologist people, it's just easier just to say field biologist. I was in the field and I did biology. Let's see. I did that for years. I did endangered species surveys. I did environmental habitat assessments. I was in the worst waters in the U.S. and some of the best. We actually found 2 species. So extirpated means locally extinct. So one species we found in Illinois was extirpated, and the government said did not exist anymore. And we were doing a survey to prove it didn't exist anymore for them. We were trying to find it, obviously. A company had started building before the survey was finished. And our last site, we caught one the whole time. One doesn't count, because if anybody knows anything about most animals, it takes 2 to tango.
Yep, right.
So one animal doesn't matter. The last site, right as this giant warehouse is being built where it's not supposed to be yet, we caught like 140 of them. They just stop construction immediately and rip all that crap out. They were not happy. Oh, and we were in the courts forever about it, saying that we planted fish and stuff like that. Like, you can't even find these fish. And so we went out and found 140 of them.
Like they're extinct, allegedly, right?
Yeah, and then we got a freckle-belly mad tom in Ohio, which was a 450-mile range expansion. So that's, for anybody who don't know what mad tom is, they're little venomous catfish. They're about the size of your thumb, is a pretty big one. So for 450-mile range, so it means it moved back into its old range, 450 miles. A fish the size of your thumb, that's pretty impressive. There's humans that walk that, and that's pretty impressive. But a fish the size of your thumb to swim up the Ohio River and get back into Ohio, that takes a lot of work. So like that's my background a little bit. Jay, my co-host, he's not here, but he is a bowling alley mechanic. His family owns the bowling alley here in town. He is much more of the conspiracy side of the podcast. He's a learner, so like he always likes to say, and I hate it, but I'll say it because he's not here. What does he always? How's he say it? I'll tell you the facts, and he'll tell you the truth. Yeah, he sounds like a truther.
Right. Absolutely. That's awesome.
There, Jay. When you're listening to this, because he
Yeah,
listens.
but you've got you got to have that juxtaposition in guests or in hosts, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of fun. We've been doing this a long time. Not a long time, but we've been doing this a while. And the only reason I still enjoy it is because of Jay. So it's a lot
Gotcha.
of fun.
Yeah, no, I understand. So finding extinct species or proving that they're either not extinct or they are. What do you think of Forrest Galante?
Now, okay, I don't know him personally.
Right.
Um, and I don't want to speak ill of anybody's career because he has a very established career.
Right.
And he has. So I found what's called extirpated. I want to make that clear for everybody at home, just because it's a little different. So extirpated means locally extinct.
Gotcha.
So
Right.
it means that those fish still exist in other parts of the country.
Right.
They just didn't exist in that state anymore. So that's a little different. I just want to point that out. So
Yeah, no, it's a
warriors out there.
distinction for sure.
But so what Forrest did in his career, he did find extinct species. So why is it important for an animal to not be extinct, even if there are several individuals out there? Is because extinct species in the world have no rights. So the second they get declared extinct, they no longer have any legal protections. So critically endangered is the highest you can go before you become extinct.
Right.
As far as the red list is concerned, the ICUN list. And that's not every country abides by that list, but most countries do. So, if you're critically endangered, because they'll try to work out benefits for protecting those animals and that kind of stuff on a global scale. So like the pig-nosed Galapagos tortoise, he found one.
Yep.
And there was one in a private collection. So there's a chance that those guys will come back because of Forrest's career. If anybody hasn't seen that little episode Forrest did with it, it was literally on an active volcano. Charles Darwin himself was responsible for a whole extinction of a tortoise species. Because when they got to the Galapagos, they turned all the tortoises upside down, put them in the bottom of the ship, and used them as meat and food for the next 10 months.
Wow.
So, and I don't care for Charles Darwin much either as a biologist, but he got a lot of credit for stuff he probably shouldn't have got credit for. Forrest's career before that, he found a crocodile species. He found a couple small cats and then a big cat. I'm trying to remember.
The Zanzibar leopard, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
there's just trail cam footage of that. But either way, it's a leopard where leopards allegedly don't exist anymore. Right.
Yeah. I mean, we dealt with that kind of stuff all the time with a lot of times it's very small fish. There's a lot of small species, like the family groups all look the same. So like for here in the US, if anybody's ever seen a muskie or a pike, they have a littler cousin called a pickerel.
Yep.
All of the babies look the same. So when you catch one, you don't know if it's a muskie, pike, or pickerel. And it really matters for water quality.
Right.
Or pickerel don't care nearly as much as a muskie does. So muskie are breeding, it matters. Anyways, his later career, I don't trust colossal bioscience.
Right. And that's the folks that are trying to do the mammoth reintroduction, also the thylacine, maybe, right?
And the Steller sea cow.
Oh, there you go.
So we can talk about all those animals because I firmly believe those 4 animals we just said. We made the dodo. Let's take out the three mammals we'll talk about. I firmly believe they're not extinct. So the mammoth, the trilocene, and the Steller sea cow. So we had literally, before they announced the Steller sea cow project, like the month before, the 2-hour episode on the Steller sea cow still being there. The biggest modern example was in 2018. A group of trawlers about 40 miles off the coast of Washington saw a manatee, and each trawler, passed in 15 minutes, saw the manatee in the Pacific Ocean in the cold waters. So the manatee species we have alive today are all tropic.
Yeah.
Steller sea cow is one of the few cold water, and they were pretty even tempered. People said it was waving at them, and that's why they got murdered very fast because they were really big and you could stab them really easy.
Right.
So when I say colossal bioscience has bought a lot of celebrity biologists, So Forrest is a celebrity biologist.
Yeah, right.
He's TikTok, Insta. He does all these shorts. There's a female paleobiologist that is another one. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she does great content. But so Colossus has started buying these creators. And if anybody's ever seen the CEO of Colossus, she claims to have a doctorate in several things. If you watch her talk and stuff like that, she's a professional BSer.
Got you.
I've seen it. Biologists are weird people. I've worked with tons and tons and tons of biologists. Not a normal one in the bunch, including myself. It just you can't do it and be normal. There's a switch in there that they don't core. So I kind of think because Colossus before the de-extinction of animals heavily worked in the de-extinction of extinct animals. They worked on preventing extinction of modern animals.
Okay.
So, condors, white rhinos, those kind of things. And they had success with that. They had a lot of trouble with funding. The second they mentioned that they wanted to work on mammoths,
Ooh.
they became the new Jurassic Park.
Literally like cash cow.
Yeah. I think so. Here's my reasoning. And we've done episodes on this, mostly on Patreon. So I think it's the first time I'm talking about it publicly. If anybody hates me, I'm sorry. What has happened is the mammoths in the Yukon and mammoths in Siberia are still seen to this day heavily.
A lot, actually. There's a lot of sighting reports, tons. Thousands.
People don't get that Siberia is the size of most massive countries. And there's
massive
30,000 people living in the whole of Siberia, and it's almost all around the rim.
And it's still prime
habitat.
It's exactly as it was 10,000 years ago.
So why there's almost no biological research done into Siberia? Because it sucks. In the winter, it sucks. And in the summer, they have a 3-month summer where actually, in a lot of Siberia, the snow will come off. It's the biggest wetland in the planet. It has the worst mosquitoes. So
kind of like Alaska, right?
Yeah,
it's horrific.
Like the mosquitoes have such a shorter life period that when it's go time, they'll eat everything alive. So there was a group of biologists that tried to go in the early 2000s, and they made it 100 miles into Siberia before they turn around because they were literally driving in these like ATV. If anybody knows what an Argo is, it's like a big 6-wheeled aquatic vehicle. I have one in the back, semi-aquatic vehicle. There were mosquitoes shoving themselves into the crevices and making a paste out of themselves because they wanted to get in at these people so bad.
It's crazy.
So they turned around because they were getting drank alive.
And there's nothing you can do about that. I mean, yeah.
So what I believe is it's much, 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 much cheaper to have a pure exhibition team go out there, find a couple mammoths, catch them because they're seen so regularly up there. And then after I kind of said that idea, they announced that they already had built in Siberia this mega compound to house their mammoths when they're done cloning them. And that 2 years ago, they said they would have the first baby mammoth in 2025. That's this year, right? And now they're saying 2026. I don't think it'll be a baby. I think they're going to show us a full-blown adult mammoth and say, see, we actually were ahead of, we were faster. We wanted to surprise everybody with this big animal.
Right, right.
So I think I really think you could catch, because the people that have gone out and looked for them are doing it on their own dime, and it's like thousands of dollars. I think you could go out and really find these mammoths for a couple $1 million. And Colossus Biosciences, I think, put $2.3 billion into the Mammoth Project. Ugh. So then the Trilocene is the next one, which we have biologists and trail camera photos and people that live there. So if anybody don't know the Trilocene episode or the Trilocene thought, Trilocenes in the 30s or the 20s and 30s were blamed for lamb killings and chicken deaths in Australia. Trilocenes pretty much ate small marsupials and birds. Their jaws opened extremely wide, and they had very frightening teeth for a lot of people.
So just for listeners, though, another name is the Tasmanian tiger.
Tasmanian tiger. Thank you. Yeah. They had really poor jaw strength. So even though they looked like a wolf or a tiger, and they had this big open jaw, their bite force was very weak compared to those predators.
Yeah.
So for them to fight lambs and sheep, even, it was very difficult. They
Well,
ate mostly small things.
Because their mouth literally opens to almost a 90-degree angle.
Right.
And like,
Looks like a hippo.
right. And then you think about that, if the muscles can extend that far, they're not going to be that strong snapping back.
It's the exact opposite of a crocodile. Anybody didn't know? Crocodiles have only their bite force down. They have none for opening. So you can sit there and hold a crocodile's mouth
Yeah,
shut.
that's why you can grab. Yeah, exactly.
They have, I think it's 15 pounds of pressure to open their mouth, and 700-800 per square inch to close it.
Right. And everyone thinks that so is it thylacine or trilacine?
Either way,
Okay.
I've heard people in Australia.
So let's say Tasmanian tiger. Everyone thinks it's like a wolf, and it's just not the case.
No, it's much more.
It's not even a canid.
Yeah, it's a marsupial. It is more. It's a kangaroo essentially. When you really look at their skeletal structure or watch them, so they hop when they walk. They still hop. Which if you look at some of the old videos when they're running and stuff, they have a hopping gait.
Yeah, you can see that at the ones that they had in the zoo.
Yeah.
In was it London?
There was, and Ohio had one too.
That's awesome. No way.
There's videos, there's modern day videos of people. That's just a fox. When you watch it, has a hopping gait. You can see the stripes on the rump. So what happened is the Australian government put a bounty on them of $15 back then per Tasmanian tiger.
A lot of money.
Today we did it. It was like $280 or something like that per tiger killed. So people made their whole careers on going and killing every tiger, every cub, everyone they could find. So what happens is, you ever heard of the rattlesnakes that don't rattle?
No.
Okay. So in Texas, there's a whole population of rattlesnakes now that no longer rattle.
Wow.
Rattlesnake roundups. So what they did in Texas, and there's a horrible practice, they went through and they killed all the rattlesnakes just to kill the rattlesnakes. So what they take a big metal piece of wood or a big metal bar and hit the rocks, and all the rattlesnakes would rattle. So the only ones that were left were the ones that don't rattle. So we selectively bred a population of rattlesnakes in Texas that no longer rattle. So yeah, we did that. Man did that to that animal. So what happened to the trilacine, in my opinion, is something similar. The ones that survived were the extremely shy ones. If anybody doesn't know, five of the 6 most unexplored rainforests in the world are in Australia. There's one rainforest that no modern scientist has gone in more than a mile because every plant animal is venomous and poisonous. Literally, they have death trees there that if you touch them, they call them suicide trees.
Yeah.
Kill yourself. If you touch, it's just a tree.
I mean,
tree, you want to kill
Australia is a wild place, man. Literally, I mean, like wild, not just as in like wild as in it's just some of the. Well, it's like a whole different ecosystem, right? It's insane.
It's where God put everything that didn't play well with other things.
Exactly.
Well, that won't work in North America. Put it in Australia. It'll be okay. So that's what happened with the trilacine, in my opinion. That their numbers got dramatically shortened. The ones that were left were in the really remote areas, and they were purposely avoiding humans. Genetically, they learned that humans became an apex predator to them. So what do animals do to their apex predators? Avoid them at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
So you have all in Australia, you have all this unexplored habitat. You have sightings that are going up by the year. So what that tells you is
not just in Australia either. It's also in Tasmania as well, right?
Yes.
But it's both.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
is there any in New Zealand or not?
I don't think they ever made that because New Zealand, even though it's part of the island chain,
it's not that close.
Very cold.
Yeah.
Imperative.
Okay. Because of elevation, right?
Yeah. So it's a lot.
Is there any other places though that they exist besides Tasmania? Maybe.
So So from Indonesia, which sits right on top, there's a line in the channel in between the Indonesian islands.
What do they call that?
There's
a name for that, right?
Yeah. That animals don't cross.
Yeah, it's so bizarre.
You can stand on an island and be looking at an elephant on a different island, and the elephant will never make it across the channel. So it's where the Asian wildlife and the Australian wildlife it's only like 20 miles.
Yeah, right. It's like the English Channel. I mean, it's not very far.
Emus and cassowaries are great swimmers. Everybody know there's a kayaker out there that was like 50 miles out, and he sees this thing coming at him, and it's just a cassowary just swimming between the islands.
It's crazy.
And just he's happy. So that's the trilocene. That's what its case is that it was hunted to extinction supposedly. Still modern sightings. There's plenty of biologists. One a big park ranger has like the pictures of what I think are good pictures on his cell phone. He's like, yeah, if you drive through the parks in the early morning, they'll run across the road. So Colossal Bioscience in Tasmania built a $80 million lab in the middle of the rainforest. And the Australians and Tasmanians are freaking out about it because they're like, we could put that money into proving they still exist. Why?
Right.
We don't need to clone them. We don't need to bring them back. They're still here. They just need protection.
Right.
And I think Colossal Bioscience already knew that. That's the point of the lab. It's
Yeah, kind of like the same thing in Siberia, right? Yeah. Just
and stellar sea cow. I think they're still out there,
right? Which is just a Pacific manatee ish.
45 feet long, though.
Wow, that's insane.
They're big.
So what else do you have? You have the manatee. You've got what's the name? Dugong, something like that.
Yeah, so there's 3 or 4 species of manatee, true manatee, and there's 2 subspecies of dugong. Here's the thing for everybody at home: you shouldn't play with any wildlife ever. Manatees are generally pretty friendly. In Florida, I don't know if there's ever been a confirmed death by manatee. In other parts of the world, there has been, and it's been mostly on accident on the manatee's part, drowning people, because they're huggers.
Yeah. Wow.
So they hug their babies, and we're about the size of a baby. So that's happened. Dugongs will drown you on purpose. Dugongs are like dolphins. They get sexually tensioned. And when they get that from competing with other males, they get angry and they'll take it out on other species.
Nice.
And humans see a dugong and assume it's a manatee, and then they drown you because they're sexually frustrated.
Wow. I just got drowned by a sexually frustrated sea cow.
Exactly.
Right.
And dugongs are very active, very fast. And so if you look at their habitats, that you can see the big difference in behaviors. Manatees are both fresh and saltwater.
Right.
They really very, very often, they are very, very rarely, they go into open water. They stay in estuaries. They stay in the coastline. They stay in inland rivers. They stay in wetlands. Dugongs are the opposite. They're open ocean animals. So if you look at the animals that the dugong's dealing with, they have predators. They have animals that will hurt them. They have animals that they have to compete with. Manatees, I mean, the only big thing with the manatee is an alligator, and alligators are not going to tackle.
And they don't usually get that big. I mean, not to deal with
not to actually sit and hunt,
right.
A 14-foot, 4,000 pound water cow.
Yeah. It's amazing.
I'll tell you one story about manatees. That's one of my favorite animals. So Blue Spring State Park in Florida is one of the, if anybody wants to see a manatee, you just want to see one. Blue Spring State Park, Florida. It's like $5 for the carload to go in.
Yep.
You can swim in
it. Is. It is. We weren't, well, I wasn't there that long ago, but we had friends. It's amazing.
So you're not, if the manatee comes in, they don't let anybody get in the water. And if you're in the water, they tell you to stand still. Manatees play with people though, all the time. So we were there watching the manatees on the observing dock, and there was these 3 like 8-year-old boys on a log in the spring, and they kept getting thrown into the air. And we were watching. It's this big adult male manatee, and he's sitting under the log, and the boys would climb back up on the log, and he would take his head and bounce him up in the air, and then the boys would climb back on the log, and they did this for like a half hour. And then there was like 4 or 5 little manatees that come around just watching these kids go flying, just having a ball.
It just makes you wonder their intelligence level, right?
I think many, many animals are much higher intelligent than humans give them credit for, because humans kind of have this apex complex to where we have to be so much more different than every other living thing. Humpback whales. We just did an episode about the humpback whale talking to the AI. Do you see that?
Yeah, I saw that. Well, I read about it. Yeah.
So basically, we've identified over 12 to 14,000 characters in humpback whale language. They have basically first, last names. They have special greetings. They have a social structure. And humpback whales, you may not know, will go out of their way to protect other species of whale and
Yep.
other species of animal. They're the only animal that I know of that has built-in brass knuckles too.
Right. Seriously.
Yeah, I mean they have what's called a barnacle pad, where they specifically want barnacles to grow in parts of their body. So they grow them on the tip of their snout, and they grow them on their fins. So when they whack something with their big 14-foot long fins, it has a big, basically a reef on it, just like
Just tear something apart.
But no, so why we've known their language forever. The problem is we can't hear the response, recognize the response, and give something back quick enough to keep them engaged.
Right.
So they'll we know their words. So this AI they just made, we can recognize in real time and respond appropriately. So this humpback whale was just circling around this boat for half an hour talking to this AI.
That's amazing.
Whale had a full blown conversation with the computer. And the only reason he left is he kept asking where you are. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Because he's looking around. I mean, think it's an 80-foot long animal. And it's like a little boat. Like, I can hear you, but I don't know where you are. And so they think he just got spooked because he was.
I mean, haven't you watched Star Trek 4, where they literally talk to humpback whales? Come on, they're aliens.
Guys, where's the whales? We're gonna wipe out Earth. The one thing
they're aliens.
The one thing you had to keep was the whales.
Yeah. Damn Anunnaki talking to whales, man. But Guardians of the Galaxy.
The whales. No, so stellar sea cows are another one that they're going to break back, and they were hunted to extinction by man. But I think they're out there in the grass meadows. I think we killed all the coastal ones, and I think so. We just discovered a grass meadow in the Atlantic, the size of about half of Ohio, that we never knew about. So people have this idea that we have the ocean mapped. We know nothing.
We don't know anything.
Lane map.
As usual, we know nothing.
The shipping lane map covers so little parts of the ocean. People have this idea that, there's cruise ships that go all over the ocean. No, there's not. 99% of the ocean has no traffic.
I mean, have we ever heard of shipping lanes? There's a reason that boats stay in certain areas.
And if you go out of them, that's why these ships disappear. Because nobody's coming to help you.
Because the Kraken's coming, baby. That's why.
So they attached, this has been 4 or 5 years ago, they attached a camera and a tracker to a 14-foot Atlantic hammerhead. And Atlantic hammerheads, if you don't know their head shape, they hunt animals mostly under the sand. That's why their shape, it's mandibular pores and stuff like that in their head. Yeah. So the shark did something weird. It bolted into the middle of the ocean. And it was super weird. They thought maybe it was upset because they had to put a camera and stuff on it. So it was panicking and running. And then it started getting warmer and shallower again. And it came up on this, in the middle of the Atlantic, this seagrass meadow that nobody had known about forever. And it started hunting turtles, and it was about half the size of Ohio, where we thought it was all deep sea ocean.
Wow.
About 40 foot of water, so perfect to grow these giant seabeds. So that's what the stellar sea cow lived in. So we know very, very few of them in the Pacific, but we know they exist. And what I mean by that is we find fry, so baby fish,
okay,
of species of fish that live in those grass meadows, but they're broadcast spawners. So their eggs end up in the current and end up everywhere. So when you get the eggs, somewhere out here, there is a giant seagrass meadow. We just don't know where it is. I mean, like I said, half the size of Ohio sounds massive, but not when you're talking about 75% of the planet.
And isn't the stellar sea cow?
Yes.
Isn't it about twice the size of like a manatee-ish?
Oh, so
it kind of follows the lines. The reason I'm saying this is it kind of follows the lines of, because it lives in a northern colder climate, they just get way bigger.
It's called Barrington's rule or Barrington's rule, something like that.
Yeah.
The further away you get from the equator, the bigger animals get. It follows the same rules. But they were found throughout a lot of parts of the Pacific. They were spotted in random weird places. There was actually an island that was called near the equator called Manatee Island in the middle of the Pacific. That by the time scientists got there were no more manatees because they had ate them all. There's no manatees out there though. There's not supposed to be manatees out there. So they were probably a population of Steller sea cows.
Probably, right.
But Steller sea cows, why they were so easily killed. So 45 feet long, right? Massive animals. We're talking 20, 30, 40,000 pounds. So for everybody at home, a semi-trailer is 52 feet long. So a little shorter than a semi-trailer and about as heavy.
Mm.
They were friendly to people. They had a unique disposition to where they would come up to boats. So what they would do is they would live in giant kelp forests and seagrass meadows. Why they weren't murdered by orcas to extinction is because orcas are terrified of kelp forest. Because animals with the tail fluke like that will get tangled and they'll drown.
Right.
Great white sharks don't go in them. Orcas don't go in them. They patrol the edges. The Steller sea cow had hands, and it would weave its way through these forests with its babies, and they were very comfortable. So they really didn't have any predation events. So they weren't scared of anything like the dodo. But everybody says dodos were dumb. No, dodos just didn't have predators. And then we came and beaten to death with a rock. So, it switched really quick. So the natives that lived along with these guys purposely did not hunt them because of whether it was spiritual things. Just they had a human nature to them. So, it didn't feel right because they'd come up to you and they would talk and blow kisses at you and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then the Steller's crew discovered them, and they were declared extinct 20 years after the Steller crew discovered them.
Which was when? 1700s?
It was early 18s, late 17s, something like that.
Okay.
I think it was 18s. It was 18 something. Dyslexic, bad with numbers. But what they would do is they'd come up behind them, and they literally had a sea cow spear that they would just stab them in the back of the head because they'd show their head. They'd come up and be like,
yeah.
"What are you doing?" And
what are you guys? Who are you guys?
Yeah. So in 2004 or 5, a Russian a beach. There's a group in Russia. They're walking along the beach, and I think they were rock collecting. And a manatee, that's the best way they could describe it. And manatee was in the shallow waters playing, and they went out there and they were petting it and stuff like that in Russia on the coast. And they're like, it was really, really big. It just looked like a manatee. And so I think they're still around. I think they're in very low numbers, and I think they hide out in the ocean. And I think Colossus is alive.
Cool. So cool. I have I don't really like the ocean anymore. I was in
You're in the Navy, yeah.
Well, I was in the Marine Corps, and I spent plenty of time on a boat, but I was in reconnaissance in the Marines, and we dove. I was a diver. So, but we also spent a lot of time out in the ocean, and where I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, you have a hammerhead breeding ground off the coast there, where literally they would film Shark Week, right? And we would still be out in the water all the time, finning, doing what, physical training, but finning. And I remember getting and it scarred me. I have serious trauma because of this, but at the end of the day, we had a huge hammerhead. Actually, there was 2 of them that were just way too close for comfort, right? And we could go, look underneath, and thank God visibility was really good that day. But I mean, thank God, or maybe I'd rather be ignorant. But we actually got, I say saved, but who knows if we were saved, but there was a bunch of bottlenose dolphin that chased them off, chased the hammerheads off from us, and then commenced to bump us. And that is a terrifying situation because it's a 1,200-pound animal. So, and when they touch you, it you feel it, man. And I've never seen somebody walk on water, but my buddy walked on water. Like it was absolute insanity. He came out of the water with his fins, like, oh my God. So
you were scared of the wrong animal.
Right.
Sharks kill 4 people a year.
Yeah, we'd be getting raped by the dolphins.
Dolphins kill 40 people a year, and half of them are rapes.
Oh, I was scared. I was scared too, because it's just massive. Like, you don't realize. And
then so the dolphins, like I said, they kill around 40 people a year in the world, and sharks only kill about 4.
That's insane.
There's movies like Jaws and stuff like that.
Yeah, of course.
Jaws and flippers, PR departments, very different.
Yep, for sure.
No, I remember we used to shark fish a lot. I love sharks. I've been in the water with some really big bull sharks. I've never really had a scary experience with sharks because we've always treated them with respect.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the big bull shark story that we had, but I can't tell you. We were on Daytona, New Smyrna, in that area, beaches in Florida,
Yep.
and we would shark fish, and this lady would just scream at us that we're attracting the sharks. And we're like, lady, we wouldn't be here. The world, the shark bite capital of the world, or sorry, the U.S. is New Smyrna Beach, Florida, because it's a pupping ground of 6 different species. So you got all these baby sharks that are like biting people's hands because they think they're fish.
Yeah.
Let it go. So people get
Because
like,
they're ignorant kids, right?
yeah, they're little kids.
There you go.
My kid bites me. Anyway, but she's screaming. We're like, go on the pier. If you go on the pier in New Smyrna, Daytona area, there's sharks swimming in and out of people all day, every day, not bothering anybody. If you don't want to get bit by a shark, don't go in the ocean. There's no such thing as shark-infested waters. Right. They live there.
Yeah, you're in there.
We built pools for a reason. If you don't want nothing to touch you, get a pool.
Right.
No, so we were shark fishing, me and my dad, off of Daytona. So if anybody don't know, it gets kind of deep, and then there's a sandbar, and then it gets deep again. So we're standing on the sandbar, and we have black tips we were keeping. This big bull shark comes in, and she's slowly passing in front of us, looking at us. Goes past, turns around, comes closer, slowly going past. Third time, closer. So on the 4th time, I got the butt of my rod ready. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit her kind of hard right behind the gills. Bull sharks are not used to being attacked. So if you do that, they freak out and you won't see them the rest. So she comes by and I bump her. I'm not hitting her to hurt her. I'm just bumping her to let her know, hey, I know you're here and I don't want you here.
Yeah.
The second I bumped her, she took off. We didn't see her. We fished for hours, never seen her again. Sharks. I mean, I like sharks more than dolphins to be in the water with, because they're the same way every time. Shark, you're not guessing. You're not trying to. They don't have moods like dolphins do. You could swim. Dolphins save people, and then dolphins rape people to death. So there's, dolphins have a little bit of a wide spectrum to guess which way you go.
Right. Just like humans, right?
Yeah, I mean dolphins are very much more like people.
Yeah, and it shows too, because they're more. I mean, that we know they're way more intelligent, and they're more intelligent in a way that we can understand, I guess, is the right way to put it.
I mean, there's still 4 U.S. dolphins. Can't remember if it was Navy or Marines that were training these dolphins to take out ships.
Yeah,
and they're still out there. They quit the program and they still have bombs on them.
Insane. And they live quite a while too. So.
Yeah, 40, 50 years, depending on the species.
It's insane.
I mean, they're smart. Very few predators. Great whites. They're kind of an animal that flips back and forth between being a predator and being harassed by dolphins.
Yeah.
But orcas eat them. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, orcas are terrifying too. I just can't get over the fact that, well, I mean, I can. It makes sense that different pods have different languages. And like the fact that people can't understand that literally like a pod, that even other pods, they can't communicate with each other because
it's like us.
They don't speak the same language, right? It's like taking us and having, people that only speak English go try and walk around Russia or wherever. And
I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah. So, and they have different habits. They have different, all the different stuff, the way they hunt, what they hunt. It's insane.
So in Alaska, for example, like you just said, there are 3 different groups of orca. Now, they have family dialects, and then they have regional dialects. Like you said, you took an orca out of Alaska and dumped it in the Arctic or the Antarctic. They would have no idea what those orcas are saying. Even though it's similar habitat and everything like that, they didn't matter. I'm not saying that orcas would be mean to them or nothing like that. It just they can't understand each other. But that's how they speciate. So in the same habitat, you will have a crew of orcas that is just salmon eaters or just fish eaters.
Yeah.
And you have the sealers, and then you'll have the whalers. all living in the same group or right on top of each other, in the same territory, and not bothered by each other because it's called they're food partitioning.
Yeah.
So dolphins know the difference. So dolphins will hang out with the fishing orcas and not the whale eating orcas because they're on the menu for those guys.
Right.
But they're helpers and they work together with these guys. So people always wonder that because you'll see videos of dolphins and orcas hanging out and stuff like that's one kind of orca.
Right.
It's not the whale or orca chasing down, blue whales and that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, those are some insane videos of them hunting. Especially when you've got the young whales and the defense. Well, that's when you see the defense stuff. Like a whale will tear you apart, man. Like
they have a peaceful nature to them, but they are big. And when they can move fast.
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. They get after it. Like they're fast. Like, and another one that's terrifying. It's the toothed whales, right? So you've got the sperm whales are a whole nother animal, and that is just I can't believe how fast they are. Like it's insane.
A spermaceti in their head. So if anybody don't know, if you look at a sperm whale's skull, it's much more like a crocodile.
Mm-hmm.
The big round thing is spermaceti. It's jelly. It's just pretty much jelly. They use for echolocation and sonic booms. Like you said, so toothed whales, right now we have 4 groups of cetaceans left, roughly. We have the ballenes, we have the toothed whales, we have the porpoises, which are everything from orcas down, and there's actually beaked whales. You ever seen a beaked whale?
No.
They're extremely rare. A lot of the species have only been seen twice. They're whales that grow tusk.
Okay.
And they are the deepest diving animals. Caviar is beaked whale. So they either grow 2 tusks right at the front of their mouth, not like a normal whale, like they're tusk, or they grow 2 tusks like a boar.
Wow. Okay.
And they're extremely peaceful, loving animals. They're very, very rare depending on which species. But they have giant gouges and scars. So these guys go to the bottom, deeper than sperm whales, and they fight stuff down there that we have no idea about. Yeah, everybody hasn't seen a beaked whale. The ginkgo-toothed beaked whale, the caviar's beaked whale, the white-topped beaked whale, and the bottle-nosed beaked whale are some really cool animals. Just look at pictures of them.
Yeah.
Because when you don't...
I wrote it down because I'm all over it.
They're very... Yeah, so it's an unknown... They're very secretive. They're very deep divers. The caviar's beaked whale holds the world record for mammal longest breath hold and mammal deepest dive. And it was on accident when we found it because one had bumped into an unmanned sub.
Oh my gosh.
So they're like, what is that? It was caviar's beaked whale, and he's hunting. So that depth was like, I don't want to guess, but it was like 8,500 meters or something like that.
That's insane.
It was 3 times deeper than the deepest sperm whale. So we're talking,
and we know the sperm whales go down and they're fighting.
they're eating squid and big squid. I mean, colossals and giant.
Colossals and giants, right?
And they come up with the scars to prove, and sperm whales not no pushover. They're big animals.
Right.
And their cousin, which is a cryptid, is Leviathan, not Leviathan, Leviathan, which was a cousin of the sperm whale that is extinct, quote unquote. So sperm whales have tiny, tiny dorsal fins towards the back of their tail. Leviathan was a toothed sperm whale. So sperm whales, you look at their jaws, they pretty much just have teeth visible in the bottom jaw.
Yeah.
They have really narrow, thin jaws because they're hunting animals like squid, soft body animals that are wriggly. So they have these big, sharp teeth and these narrow jaws to grab them and just hold. And just, they're not fighting animals that they got to really rip into,
Right.
Leviathan was the opposite. It was a cousin of the sperm whale that ate other whales and megalodons.
Ooh-wee.
So their favorite foods were baleen whales and megalodons. So they kind of were competing with the megalodon at the same time because megalodons were whale hunters.
Yeah.
Specifically, what they targeted was big baleen whales, the middle class of baleen whales. So they both went extinct around the same time. And it was around the time the orcas started taking off. So they think, orcas were probably the nail in the coffin for both those species. Because orcas do hunt the same prey, but they do it cooperatively. So they can really confuse one single...
Way more lethal, right.
But Leviathan may still be around in some areas. So there's a cryptid called the high-fin sperm whale. That every once in a while, it's been seen since the whaling industry. Whaling is still going on today. It's a horrible practice. But the big fallout of the major whaling industry was in the 1950s. So from the 1600s to the 1950s, 400 years-ish, of hardcore whaling. Every once in a while, they'd say that they'd see a high fin sperm whale. So what that is a sperm whale that had an orca fin. It'd be always by itself. It was always 10 times more aggressive, and they always had trouble killing them. Most whalers wouldn't even mess with them because they were one of the few whales that would turn back around and fight.
Yeah, like Moby Dick.
Yeah, which Moby Dick is was it not the what was the name of that ship? The one that a whale actually sunk in the Pacific and all.
Oh yeah,
the
yeah,
Ulysses, was it the SS Ulysses or something like that?
something like that, right? But could that have been a high fin sperm whale? Probably.
That, I mean, it was a whale they were stabbing. So
Yeah, so obviously it's going to fight back. But I wonder,
one of the things they think with that case was the nail. So one of the tracking boats that they had cut the lead, they started nailing tarp, and a couple people now have remade that sound. And it's very similar to bull baleen whales or bull sperm whales aggression calls for other males. So they think that there's a chance that when the whale was attacked, because it was the biggest whale the crew had ever seen.
Yeah.
And they did that sound. So the whale maybe took the attack as a territorial attack, not a predatory attack. So he turned around because he pretty much just rammed his head through the bottom of the ship.
Yeah.
I mean, just took it out. If whales would have figured out how easy it was, they would have done it a lot sooner. I mean, we burnt enough whales that on the Antarctic ice sheet, it looks like a volcano erupted. We burnt so many whales. I want to say that again. That geologists and glaciologists, when they do ice cores, you can see it in the ice core in Antarctica, whale burn. It looks like a volcanic eruption.
Right.
No, so hyphen sperm whales, yeah. That's a cryptid. Maybe
Okay.
Leviathan.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I'm a rambler.
No, I mean, I love this stuff, man. So but all right. So the one question that I always ask folks, just to shift gears just a touch, not a big gear shift, but a little one, so I always ask people, I call it their gateway drug to this high strangeness, world. And, mine is Bigfoot.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I had an experience when I was young. And that just like set the nail in the coffin. But I also say on the wider ranges, like Norse mythology, I was just obsessed with it when I was a kid. Right. But anyway, and that's where you get some of these ideas anyway. I mean, but so the one question I always ask is, what is your gateway to this world of high strangeness?
Lake and sea monsters.
Lake and sea monsters.
When I was a little kid, I'm still obsessed. I tried to hunt the South Bay Bessie here. I had a great white shark hook, and I put a whole chicken on it, and I attached it with steel cable.
Yeah.
I tried to hunt Lake South Bay Bessie, our Lake Erie's lake monster, at least on our side of the lake, because it's called the Lake Erie Chomper across in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
No, sea monsters, lake monsters, river monsters. Ohio horned serpents. I've been obsessed with it since I was young, and I heard about them. Which I could talk about that for a second because there's not a lot on them. I've probably done the most on them that is out there.
What is it? Ohio what?
Horned serpents.
Okay.
There's it's so weird. So they were so commonplace that nobody cared.
Right. It was just a normal part of the landscape.
What people don't understand is alligators are native to Ohio. Before we dammed up the Ohio River and killed them all in the 1800s, alligators were in Ohio. They were in the Ohio River all the way up through Ohio and in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So they weren't super common, but it was not unheard of for an alligator to naturally swim up the. So most time it'd be what we called retiring adults, to where that they weren't because they really couldn't breed here in Ohio very effectively. But the adults, the old ones, the old timers, would come up the Ohio River for easier prey and less competition. So this retiring group of alligators would come all the way up.
Gotcha.
So Ohio horned serpents were talked about like that in the 1800s with the shipping lanes. So we had a couple captain's journals that say seen 3 Ohio horned serpents near Cincinnati today. Stopped traffic for an hour. Wouldn't get out of the way. And they would talk about, so these guys were about 80 feet long. They had 3 bumps on their head. Where's the horns come from? They weren't like rhino horns. Most people would draw them and be like almost like a big snake or an eel with these almost knots on their head.
Wow.
And they would swim across the Ohio and they'd play in the river. And people would stop traffic for them because what they would talk about in these journals was they were not a violent or dangerous creature if you did not mess with them. If the ships would stop and let them pass, the only ones that wouldn't stop would be the barges because they don't stop for anything. So it's presumed that they'd get out of the way. The second Ohio and Pennsylvania and West Virginia started doing open coal mining and industrialization, they all disappeared overnight.
Wow.
Because if anybody didn't know, the Ohio River is extremely radioactive now because
Right.
of coal mining. Because there's a lot of radioactive materials. It's called seep ponds. If you drive down the Ohio River, you see these little ponds next to these coal plants. They're seep ponds, sludge ponds. That's where they dump all the radioactive crap from coal. And then every time it rains, it goes to the Ohio River. So overnight, these animals disappeared. So they went from everyday occurrences to nobody's ever heard of them.
Wow.
And so when we see animals, specifically sensitive species, I mean, they're called indicator species. When they leave the environment, they disappear. So Serpent's Mound is only about 30 miles from there. So everybody's always trying to guess what Serpent's Mound is and all this stuff. To me, it's a horned serpent.
Okay.
And literally, it's 30 miles from where these things were commonplace. It's a giant serpent that they say has fins on its head or antlers. And I just look at it as horns.
Yeah.
30 miles away, they had giant horned serpents swimming everywhere.
Everywhere. Like you said, commonplace. Like it was just like another thing.
And then they haven't really been seen since. So eels, I think they're probably a species of giant eel. And that's a whole thing. But so eels are androgynous. All true eels in the North America, South America, Europe, and Africa breed in what's called the Sargasso Sea in the middle of the Atlantic. So I want to say that again. The eel in Minnesota swims all the way down the Mississippi River through the Gulf into the Atlantic to breed in the middle of the ocean called the Sargasso Sea. The eel in Europe does the same thing. The eel in the Amazon does the same thing. The eel in Africa and the Congo does the same thing. We have never, ever seen an eel breed. We've never seen them give birth. We've never seen them lay eggs. All we know is that adult eels go there and baby eels come out. I mean, for all we know, it's a portal because you can't dive in the Sargasso Sea. You may know it, but for the listeners at home, the Sargasso Sea is like a turning point. It's full of every bit of garbage in the ocean, and it's killed a lot of divers because you get tangled and stuff, and you can't come out.
Right.
You're down there. So there's no unmanned subs that have really gone through and investigated because it's so difficult. So I think that eels follow what's called the rule of 160. They have a stage in their life cycle called a glass eel, which is a little transparent larva. Every species, except one, which may not be an exception, follows the rule of 160. That larva stage is 1/60th of the adult size. And I'm saying true species of eels because there's a lot of animals we call eels that aren't eels, like electric eels aren't eels, that kind of stuff. Except one. We found in the 1900s, we found 2 glass eels. So keep in mind, I said the glass eel is 1/60th the adult size. We found 2 glass eels that were each 6 feet long. So a bunch of biologists said that has to be the exception, right? That's the exception. They just must be a little bigger than their glass stage.
Right.
I am the opposite. I say they probably follow the same rule. And we caught 2 larvas of this world of sea serpents, these giant eels that go into. So they'll be 8-foot American eels in a mountain stream in West Virginia that bred in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And they'll spend their whole life, as they're small, getting back up there. And they have such slow metabolisms, and they'll live up there for 80 years before they go back and breed. I think that's what's happening. So we're sharing a global, almost species of eel. That's our sea serpent. That's our lake monster. That's our, the Ohio horned serpents. So conger eels are the biggest fresh androgynous eel right now, and they have bumps on their head. So just make them 80 foot long, make them 100 foot long. So yeah, I mean, that idea got me into it long time ago. There's a book I have in my collection I got when I was like 10. A 10-year-old shouldn't be reading. I think it's called Eels, Eels, Eels.
Right.
And it's just a biologist writing about eels. And it's about that thick.
Right.
It's about 4 inches thick. If you hit somebody with it, it'd suck. Uh,
All on eels.
all on eels, just eels, and actually only 3 species of like 400 eels. So yeah, that was my gateway drug. So that happened, and it's the more I did it, and even when I started working as a biologist, there's this idea that biologists don't believe in Bigfoot, and that's untrue, as extremely untrue. And it's not saying it's every biologist believes in Bigfoot, but it's definitely much more of a split topic. People that work, so I worked with people that worked with endangered species. That's all we did. Like that's their whole career was endangered and extinct species.
Yeah.
And they were split on the subject. Like you, I had an encounter when I was young, and so I know Bigfoot exists. I don't know what Bigfoot is. I know Bigfoot exists.
Something's there.
Yes.
Right.
But biologists are really, really split on it. We've talked about the peer review process too. People don't understand how peer review works and how it's not science. It's actually nonsense.
Yeah.
Do you know how peer review works personally?
To an extent, but not, it's cursory.
Yeah. So I'll tell your listeners at home so they know. It's very simple. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. It's very simple. A scientist at a lab works. He does not get a pick, so he can do whatever projects he wants on his his lab time. The administrator that does not have a scientific degree, has no background in science, the administrator of that college or university or project group will either assign him a study or will select what studies can even be in the process of peer review. So just because this scientist maybe wants to do Bigfoot research or wants to do anything in the paranormal, doesn't matter. They got to do XYZ because an administrator told them they have to do XYZ, but they want to keep their lab hours. So for a paper to get to the peer review process means nothing. It means 2 administrators. So on the other end, if you wanted to, so peer review is only done by other scientists, right? But their administrator has to agree that they're allowed to peer review it. So you have to have 2 administrators that have no scientific background. One has to pick the study for the scientist. The other one has to agree that their scientist will peer review it. So it's all just HR. It's all just administrators. It's all public relations.
And or agenda driven.
Agenda. Yeah. Has nothing to do with science. It has absolutely nothing to do with science or the science in the paper. So the peer review study process is the dumbest thing that the average person does not understand, because the media, we have painted it that, oh, if it's peer reviewed, it's, it's popular, it's right, it's good. They won't even let anything else come peer reviewed. It doesn't have to be controversial stuff. We did a couple examples when we talked about it, that it was, cancer cell, cancer cell replication studies. That this college, the scientist had spent a lot of time working on this project, a lot of time, trying to, for the betterment of humanity. His administrator didn't want the college to be known as the cancer college, so shot it down. 10 years of his life.
That's insane.
So there's a paper out there about cancer cell, something with that a guy, a highly accredited scientist, spent 10 years of his life devoted to, that his admin just went, we don't want to be the cancer college. That's it. That's the end of the process for that guy. It does not matter about the quality, the time, the experiences, the experiments. It has zero to do with that. It's all 2 admins have to agree that it looks okay for their college's reputation.
So it's crazy though that you actually have scientists that say peer-reviewed work is the gold standard, right?
And they lose their job.
Right. So what a farce.
Yeah, it not saying peer review is bad as far as if a study is peer reviewed. All it means for everybody at home is that 2 administrators with no scientific background agreed that this study looks okay for their college.
Right.
So the two scientists have nothing to do with it. You know, once they're done and they publish their study or whatever, they may even get their study published.
Right. And like you said, that doesn't mean studies are bad. It
No,
just means studies that have been peer reviewed are bad. It's just that,
but unpeer reviewed studies are good too.
Yeah,
Look,
exactly.
look at the credits of the person. Look into the person that's doing it or the team. There's several great research organizations out there right now that they have, like the company I used to work for, they self-publish studies all the time. Great work. I trust all those scientists that did the work. They'll never get peer reviewed because they didn't like the company.
Yeah, right.
So
Understand.
they're just going to sit there in limbo forever. But the information's out there.
Yeah. Wow. Crazy.
Are you taking a
Well,
break?
I mean, it opens up a lot of cans when you're talking about, cryptids, Bigfoots, I mean, even mammoths and things like that. It's like, what do we actually have evidence for, right? And whether it's DNA or it's, more anecdotal type stuff, or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm sure there's papers written all the time that just get,
They sit in limbo.
Yeah.
Just sit in limbo. And then a lot of them go behind paywalls also.
Right.
The university will hide them behind paywalls so you can't see the studies, especially if they do not like them. Some of the big questions about Sasquatch. I mean, I love talking about Bigfoot, but I mean, we're on the How Bigfoot Jamboree. We'll see you out there.
Yeah.
October 4th. So Bigfoot DNA, the hair collection. I did eDNA. I did that for a big part of my job. eDNA is probably the most misused thing in the Bigfoot community or cryptid paranormal community right now, period. There are tons of people that just don't understand it. There are tons of people misusing it or misusing the terminology.
Right.
I felt really bad. We were speakers at a festival. I felt really bad because I didn't watch the guy go on before us. And I don't know if he was personally lied to about eDNA, but he had a chunk of eDNA in his talk that was like 15 minutes and it was completely wrong. And we had gone on right after him. And I had no idea. I had no idea.
Right.
But the audience was like really into asking me questions about eDNA.
Oh, and you
before us had no idea. But he had it in his presentation. And then finally at the end, the lady's like, well, that's like the complete opposite the guy before you.
that's so bad. You just blew his shit up.
Sorry.
Oh,
well,
man.
here's my accreditations. You can call where I worked for.
Right.
I did this. I did it for a living, but what do I know?
Oh, man.
No, so eDNA, it is in its infancy. It does not work extremely well yet. And people act like it is the end all be all right now.
Yeah. Well, it's because it gives them what they want. It's confirmation bias, right?
So how it works is it's environmental DNA for everybody at home. We take water, soil, or air samples. Water's the best, holds DNA fragments and spreads over a big area. So, like if we did it in the Ohio River, you can get eDNA fragments from every species of plant, animal, and other in that watershed. Because everything that's shedding cells and going, it can pull very, very, very tiny DNA fragments. So after you do this, it's a hard process. You can only do like 3, maybe 4 samples a day because you have to get up early. You have to do it when it's daylight. You can't do it in the dark because of photosynthesis. You have to do it during the day, but you have to get it to the lab filtered by 2 p.m. because the lab has to do their part after you filtered the sample. So it's only good for a couple hours. So like the Nessie eDNA survey was a joke.
Right.
They did 85 samples in one afternoon. It's impossible. It was one guy did it. It's impossible.
Right.
What he did is he went down to the dock and collected all the water from one spot. So the eDNA sample for Loch Ness, whatever, 4 or 5 years ago, they didn't get any river otter samples. And in the picture of the guy taking the samples, you could see a river otter.
Right.
So they didn't get any samples, and physically you could see the animal. No, so they did it wrong. So it's only as good as its database as well. So you take all these samples and you put them into what the computer basically does is it compares them to a database of known samples. Your database varies heavily. So if you use a database, so let's say you did you took a sample here in the Scioto River or the Ohio River, and you just did it with the database that only has Ohio native species, you're going to get tons of unknown hits.
Right.
Because what do we have in zoos and stuff like that? If you're close enough, you're going to have lion DNA. You're going to have elephant DNA.
Absolutely.
Not because they're not there, but what it'll come back as is unknown species.
Right.
Not that it's unknown everywhere. It just the database, the comparison database you used is unknown. So all these DNA, some of the TV shows for people at home, and they do these samples and it says unknown species, doesn't mean it's Bigfoot. It's all about the database they're using.
Right.
Not saying it's not Bigfoot. I believe in Bigfoot. I've seen one. But TV is a thing you got to kind of watch, educate yourself. The other side of it is when you watch people. So yeah, I hate it every time. And Jay and everybody collect hair samples.
Yeah.
And they're like they're 2 inches from it, breathing on it.
Yeah.
They have ungloved hands and they pick it up, put it in the bag. Just burn that sample.
Right.
You've contaminated it to out, when we would have 2 sets of gloves, we'd have a set of gloves inside of a sterile bag that we'd have to open with a set of gloves.
Right.
DNA. And we'd have to wear a face mask and all. Anyways, you can contaminate
Wow.
You're like primate or human or, half human genome and all that. Yeah, you breathed on it,
Right.
You're
anything. Your spit landed on it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's you, and then it'll come back contaminated. So if it's too close to human, a lot of systems will actually just kick it out as contaminated.
Right.
So you have to really be looking at what you're doing. And Bigfoot DNA samples do not matter until you have a comparative sample. So for all these people at home, sorry, Bigfoot DNA does not matter until there's a dead one on a slab that you can be like, and then you can retroactively test all those hair samples.
Right.
Well, the best thing you're going to get is unknown species. That's the best. I mean, that's the best, and there's other reasons it could come out. So eDNA is a big one. Yeah, I mean, the science behind the Sasquatch is the talk we do a lot. Like another big one, where's all the bones, right? And we talk about Admiralty Island, which is in Alaska, has the highest grizzly bear population in the world. It has about 35,000 grizzly bears on this little island. It's about 4 square miles. That's a lot of grizzly bears.
Lots.
3% of the population dies every year, 3 to 10%, depending on how bad the year is, because of birth rates and stuff like that. So it evens out. So if you have 35,000 bears and 10% dies, that's 3,500 grizzly bears are dying a year on this island. Mm. The head biologist that was there, he'd been there for 22 years. He'd only ever found 2 dead grizzly bears that he didn't want to get killed. And so the one had a radio collar on it too.
That like kind of blows your mind a little bit. Right. Like, oh.
The University of Washington did studies. The average time for an elk to be unidentifiable from the carcass is 6 days. So you have 6 days, depending on where you are, you have 6 days to walk up on a Bigfoot corpse before it's unidentifiable. I mean, how many times do people just think, oh, that's a weird bone? That's, a chunk. And then there's not nearly as many of them. I'm a big believer that our population on the North American continent is around 15 to 20,000 animals or beings, depending on how you view it. Like we're animals, but so 20, I'm going to guess around 15 to 25,000, somewhere in there. So 20 is a good number. And that's the North American continent, everybody. Not so like Ohio may have 400 of them or 300 of them. North Carolina may have 2,000 of them. The Yukon may have 10,000 of them, so they're spread out. Highly migratory. They do not migrate because of the cold. I've had emails about that. Well, Bigfoot's not scared of the cold. Animals don't migrate fully because mammoths didn't migrate because of the cold. They are built for it. They followed the food.
Right.
Bigfoot follows probably the spring thaw.
Because I live in an area that gets freaking cold and we get a lot of snow, right? In upstate New York. And we had the theory from our research area that maybe they would leave in the winter and like head south, right? Mm-hmm. At least to get whatever. But it turns out that is probably not the case because we've got instances where we're dealing with evidence that they're here in the winter, especially around my buddy's house where we do this research. And
they're not scared of the cold. it's more. I'm a firm believer. It's definitely more food and resource driven. I think they act much more like nomadic humans or gorillas, with having a humongous territory and maybe 4 miniature territories inside,
Yeah, yeah.
where a quarter of the year we're here, so they don't exhaust resources. A lot of animals do that.
Right. Well, I just talked to, I can't remember the name of it was Sirens of something, Sirens of the Supernatural. Well, he was talking about the wood bugger, which is just kind of like
Yeah.
one of the Blue Ridge Mountain version, right? And he was talking about that park rangers that he knew and had conversations with is in the winter, he goes, well, at this time of year, you got to go to the other side of the ridge, because that's where they're at. That's where the
Yeah.
food's at. And then during the summer, they'll come back over to the other side of
100%.
the ridge, right?
Yeah.
Just like elk, just like bears, just like wolves,
If we
just
were
like
still living,
everything.
it'd be like us.
Yeah,
I mean, humans, when we
absolutely.
were in our nomadic stage, that's what we did. We followed the food. It wasn't the cold. We weren't
Right.
running from the cold.
No,
We
right.
went food and shelter. Uh, and then we've identified a couple what I believe are breeding areas. Uh,
Okay.
which well, how we kind of determine that personally is we look at behaviors, right? So there's a couple areas in the U.S. where there's very, very, very terrifying Bigfoot encounters that nobody ever gets hurt in.
Yeah.
And they're constantly the same. The tree shakes, the bluff charges, the rocks, being flung past my head,
Yeah.
not hitting, and then they'll follow you all the way to the car, they'll follow away to the campground. So what we kind of think is, and it's seasonal, it's very seasonal. And we think it may be where they're either giving birth or spending a couple months after a birth to rear up. So depending on which ape you look at,
Yep.
humans, we have extremely long, quote unquote, baby stages.
For
Our
sure.
brains, we're born very large. Our brains are born very big, so our heads have to be collapsible to come out. So there's a lot of big learning curve. When you look at more simple primates, their heads don't do that. They come
Yeah.
out, and they like little species of monkey or a lemur. They're good after 2 or 3 days running around. Gorillas have to be carried for a couple months.
Yep.
So that's kind of when I look at, gorillas have about 2-month period of a really intensive baby care,
Yeah.
where the baby can start hanging on or sitting in a nest, or I think there may be that stage. So if anybody didn't know the Ohio Grassman, how that kind of got started, it got coined either Monster Quest or something like that. It's not a real Ohio name for Bigfoot, but now it is. So in Hocking, which is where the baby site is, in my opinion, there's these woven tunnels in some of the grass hills. So you see on TV the big brown nest, and that's what they say there's the Ohio nest. That's not what they ever look like until TV. Before that, they look like these big woven tunnels they're big, but they're you can't see them from the outside. We've actually been in one, and you get into them, and you could sit in this tunnel. A 300-pound adult man can sit in this tunnel comfortably, and my buddy was 15 feet from me, looking at me, and couldn't see me or hear me or nothing.
Yeah.
So I think there are these areas where there's high abundance of food. So anybody that don't know, Hocking Hills is tons and tons of ravines, valleys, ditches, canyons. There's all these areas that humans, even though it's a high trafficked area, can't get to very easily. And even when they do, they hide their babies. So I think maybe that's where they're spending their first couple months.
Yeah. Right. Which makes sense.
Yeah. Because there's Bigfoot here in Northwest Ohio where I live, but we are corn. So in the spring, it's much harder to hide. It's much harder to get around and not be seen.
For sure.
The summer, though, we have we have tons and tons of Bigfoot sightings in the corn, where you see the heads. And for us, on a bad year, corn's 6.5 feet tall.
Yeah.
Sometimes our corn's 10 feet tall.
Yeah.
And people are seeing the heads and shoulders of creatures.
Yeah. I'm originally from Illinois, and
there you go. Yeah.
that's I get it. Yeah. And I've totally been bluff charged in Illinois. Also in Alaska, same thing. But yeah, it's fascinating stuff, man.
That's the only Bigfoot I'd be actually scared of would be Alaska.
I mean, whatever it was, and it wasn't a bear and it wasn't a moose, because we had already done it. Not saying that we could, but we could see a silhouette.
Yeah.
And it was massive. It was absolutely horrendously massive. And you just feel like, we have I always say we have our own uh, toroidal field, right? As a human, and you can just feel things, right? And this thing was massive, whatever it was. It was over 10 feet tall. It was just massive. It's what the definition I like to say is it was, if you want to talk about a boreal Sasquatch, that's what it was. And it was insanely massive. You could just feel it. Every time it moved, you could feel the ground. There was like vibration. It was, terrifying.
Barrington's Law. They get bigger. They get bigger. They're
Right.
from the equator. And then when I say Alaska or the Yukon, it's because I don't think Bigfoot in the lower 48. I think they do hurt people, and I think a lot of times it's maybe provoked. I think it's very rare for that to occur, at least in the lower 48. In Alaska and the Yukon, it's hard. It's hard to live. The calories you get, you get
Yeah,
low on food.
it's competitive, right?
And you have to. That's where humans have eaten other humans. It's
Yeah.
because it's gotten hard enough that we're all going to die, or we're going to have to eat each other. So I think Bigfoot would probably, depending on what time of year, maybe fall into that
Absolutely.
category. Food is food at some point.
Mm.
But like even the attacks we've heard here, and we've had people on the show, and we've had we've done a lot of historical reports. Adam Benedict's already at home. Adam Benedict's books, Monsters in Print and Oddities in Print. He just went through the Library of Congress and literally pulled articles from all the way from 1600s and into like the 1920s is his range. And we use it all the time because it's just such a good resource to read. Bigfoot was shot and attacked 2 people. But no, it seems like a lot of the violent attacks, like actual hurting attacks here in the lower 48 have been, they shot at him or they shot at a kid, like Ape Canyon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Story of Ape Canyon you listen to?
Yeah.
They shot one off a cliff, a baby, because it was 6 foot tall. They shot one, and then all hell broke loose. Well, you shot
all hell broke loose, right? Yeah, just like it would be if
my kid, everything.
Yeah.
There's going to be problems. There's going to be
serious problems.
issues real fast. And there's a lot of that. It just seems to be a lot of that with the Bigfoot violent. I don't think
agreed.
If they were grabbing people, we'd know about it. I think a little
You
more.
would have a lot more, we always have like missing 411 and whatnot,
okay.
but
That's okay.
Yeah. So right, exactly. Could be so many things, right?
All of it.
So we could literally talk all day. But I want you to promote the Ohio Bigfoot
Jamboree. Yeah.
So give it a good plug, and then tell us where our listeners can find you. We started the podcast that way, but again, tell everyone where they can find you.
All right. So once again, it's Cryptids of the Corn podcast. You can find out any podcast catcher. You can find all our information at cryptidsofcorn.com for everything, including the Jamboree. I'll talk about that in a second. Podcast everywhere. Or cryptidsofcorn.com, cryptidsofcornpodcast@gmail.com for the email. You want to reach out to us, that'd be perfect. So the Jamboree, the Ohio Bigfoot Jamboree, is the Cryptids of Corn Bigfoot Festival in our hometown of Ada, Ohio. We were extremely blessed last year. We had 3,500 people show up with 3 countries represented. We had amazing speakers. We had so much fun. It's an all weekend kind of thing. We're still working on this year's details, but I can tell you some of the speakers Ron Murphy. He's been on everything from Monster Quest. He's been on a lot of Small Town Monsters productions.
Mm-hmm.
He's a researcher. He's probably the guy if you want to know anything about the invasion of Chestnut Ridge, the Bigfoot alien invasion. He is the guy. He spent months and months there doing research. He's several books. His books are really great, well thought out. What Ron does is he'll literally go to the area for weeks and weeks, interview, walk the path. So he's one of our speakers. Tony Merkel. This is the first time I'm announcing this. So Tony Merkel,
big name,
one of our speakers this year. So he's actually speaking, and he hates speaking. So
right.
We appreciate Tony. We love Tony to death. He's a dear friend of ours. Um, it's Connor and Alex are speakers. They're from the Cincinnati Zoo. They're both high-level zoologists that are going to be talking about the science behind the Sasquatch.
Were they there last year too?
They weren't speakers, but they were there.
Okay. Gotcha.
But they're actually taking over
I've heard him speak before though. I feel like maybe
probably through the show and stuff like that.
yeah, maybe.
This is their first public, as far as speaking experience about Bigfoot. But they're taking it as two high-level zoologists. Alex actually does, which is it's a husband and wife duo. Her specialty right now is cetacean behaviors in language. So they're playing that to Bigfoot.
That's
so
awesome.
I'm a big guy of whales, but and we're speakers. And then I'm forgetting somebody, and I feel horrible. Who am I forgetting? It's what happens when I get put on the spot. Ron, Connor, and Alex. Oh, Randy, from the Minnesota Bigfoot Homestead.
Okay.
He's been on the shows for the podcast circuit forever. As far as I know, this is like his second ever like public speaking about his property. He has much more of the supernatural Sasquatches on his property. He's got a lot of weird pictures, and the Sea Squatchers and Doug Hijack have been to his property and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of Monster Quest.
Yeah. Doug Hijack, yeah.
Yeah.
Doug's actually been on his property many times. So Randy, if you listen, he's been on our show 3 times. If you listen to it, it sounds like he's making it all up. But we've had so many people that we know that have gone on his property and experienced the same things.
Yeah, right.
It's all sounds crazy, but there's people I trust. And I trust Randy. I'm just saying there's outside people.
Well, it's always good to get, other confirmation, of course, right?
So the speakers, there's going to be tickets available. They go on sale March 15th. The rest of the event's free. The vendors market. There's going to be a kids area. There's meet and Sasquatch. There's going to be a little museum set up with everything from Bigfoot casts to local history to sighting boards and that kind of
Food
stuff.
trucks?
Huh? Yeah.
Food trucks?
Yep.
Nice.
Barbecue.
I don't know why I asked that.
I know.
I love food trucks.
I love food trucks. It's better than most restaurants anymore.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's like so many of them are just like artisans, and it's really cool.
Cooking in a truck, it's because you love cooking.
And what you're cooking, you've perfected it usually. Usually.
As long as the food truck has like 3 items.
Yeah, right.
Like if you're like, this, all we do is brisket. I'll take 3. I'll take 3.
I accept your brisket.
No, so it's a ton of fun. Tickets, like we do VIP dinners, meet and greets. We have a ton of fun, like everything from Bigfoot calling contest to monster dress up. I don't care if it's a movie monster or cryptid dress up is your favorite. We had some really fun ones. We had some really elaborate ones last year. And then the monster calling contest or the Bigfoot calling contest is because we do it in the Ada Park, the Ada Memorial Park. And you can find all this information on crypticorn.com under the Bigfoot tab, the High Bigfoot Jamboree tab. We did it, and there was a visiting soccer team that had no idea in the other side of the
man.
We had these giant loudspeakers, and people were filming it and posting it online. Like, what the heck is going on?
What is this?
Tons of Bigfoots walking around. We have a couple of our own Bigfoots you can meet, but I know for a fact there'll be several other Bigfoots. Like I believe CT Clyde, which is the representative of the Hocking Hills Bigfoot Festival.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's coming this year. He's another friend Bigfoot of ours. All the Bigfoots we have, you free to get your picture with. All that we don't do none. And one more is Wild Bill from Mountain Monsters. Anybody didn't see the Mountain Monster TV show? It is the single best TV show ever made. I love those guys to death. Wild Bill has become a personal friend of ours. I grew up watching him on TV, and now we hang out with him.
It's definitely entertaining.
Now, I didn't say anything about it is 100% entertaining.
Yes.
And what I say about Mountain Monsters is they did a great service for the cryptid community because they pushed the envelope so far the other way.
Yeah.
Talking like this is in the middle now. But think about 20 years ago. You couldn't do, we'd be nuts. We'd be nuts talking about this. But shows like Mountain Monsters, shoot, just yelling, chasing down snaily gassers, fighting them with shotguns in the middle of the
Right. They're caged. They've got one caged and trapped, and
It's giant, and then Buck got possessed by the Cherokee Devil.
Right. So good.
But they pushed it so far. In all honesty, they pushed the envelope so far the other way that now we can have normal conversations about this. And so they did a great, but Wild
Yeah,
Bill,
for guys like us, the stigma's like gone now. Like people hear that, oh, you do a podcast and you talk about stuff, because I do active research too.
Yeah.
And people are like, wait, I don't get hardly any of that anymore. I mean, I still get, you're out of your mind, but it's not like it was, 5-10 years ago.
my grandpa, before he passed, talking about in the 80s, like if you came in and said to a bar you've seen a Bigfoot, or they'd throw you, they beat you up.
Yeah, they throw you out of the bar.
Hurt you because you said you seen a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And now we're out here. There's festivals that have 65,000 people coming out and hanging out just talking about Bigfoot all weekend.
I mean, my wife just went to Woodstock, New York for a girls' weekend.
Yeah.
And she brought me home from a regular gift shop, brought me home a pair of Bigfoot socks.
Yeah.
And she's like, this wasn't the only thing that was there, especially in upstate New York here. You've got the Adirondacks and the Catskills and target rich environment, so it's really funny.
So yeah, Wild Bill will be there. He's great with kids. He never talks about it, but he does tons of charity work. So I always talk about it because he'll never ever mention it.
Right.
Including when we had the hurricane, the flooding real bad in Tennessee and Kentucky. He was up, and so that was right before our festival last year. Up until the day he got there, he was down there for like a week and a half, chainsawing and doing relief work. He literally got to the hotel, still chainsaw on the bed of his truck, covered in mud. He went to the last second because he didn't want to miss the festival, but he spent every bit of time doing something for somebody else. So he'll be there. He's always so much fun. Get your picture. I think he does like 10 or 20 bucks a print. Pay the man. He's awesome.
Right.
But we have so much fun. It's just, we wanted to bring one home because we do these all over the country.
Absolutely.
And they're great. And our town was kind of split on it because like council, half of them were like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. We don't want nothing to do with it. Our park is not ran by our town though. So the park guys are like, that's awesome.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. What do we got to do? And so some of the town hated it. Some of the town loved it, which I love. Because some of the town hates me and some of the town loves me.
Right.
But that's all the plugs. I think I remembered everything. Tickets go on sale. Cryptids.com March 15th. There's a very limited number of the speaker VIP tickets and the VIP dinner. Like, it's all one. If you buy a VIP ticket, you get the Friday night meet and greet, dinner, games, and then the Saturday, the speakers. Everything else is free. There's going to be a free kids room with drawing and like mini speakers and like where they'll do like a 15-minute talk instead of an hour talk. More aimed at families, so the kids don't have to stay there for an hour. There's going to be, like I said, the track museum. There's going to be Bigfoots. There's going to be a full-scale model of Bigfoot out there, so you can see how big these guys actually get. Well, it's only about 8 foot. You were in Alaska, where they say they get to 12, which is just a whole different thing.
It's a whole different animal, literally, like weight-wise, and I mean.
But you see how big an Ohio Bigfoot is on average.
Right.
But yeah, it's going to be so much fun. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you out there too.
Yeah, I will be. Well, I'm not going to guarantee it, but we'll talk about it. Yeah. We'll talk about it on later episodes of this podcast because I've got to make sure, but I have it in the first hurdle has been crossed, which I have it in the calendar.
October 4th. It's October 4th. I never said the day.
Yeah, the calendar, October 4th. So I have it in my calendar. So that's half the battle right there, because if it's not in the calendar, it's not real. Right? So
yeah, I get it. I do the same thing. But yeah, I think that's all the plugs. Like I said, I'm bad about this. I wish Jay was here.
Oh, well, either way, Justin, amazing. Thanks for joining us today. And we need to do it again.
Sounds good. You can come on our show next.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Whenever you want. So,
sounds good.
All right, man. I totally appreciate it. And I will talk to you again soon.
Sounds good.